there, in this video I'm going to be telling you all about my experience of decluttering a hoarder's house. A few months ago I was asked to help declutter a hoarder's house. Hoarding can be a very sensitive issue, and if you are ever faced with a situation where you are decluttering a house where the person has hoarded a large amount of items for a very long period of time, it can be a very difficult and overwhelming task. It could be an older person who is moving out and going to assisted living or aged care living or downsizing to a smaller home, and they've just got all this stuff that they can't take with them. Or it could be a deceased estate. It could be someone who has passed away. In the situation that I helped with, it was actually a deceased estate, so the person had passed away and the family needed to declutter their home and get the house ready for sale. Out of respect for the deceased, I'm not going to be talking about who the deceased was. The purpose of this video is to give you tips and some learnings from my own experience of having decluttered a hoarder's house to help you in case you're ever faced with a similar experience or someone you know is faced with having to do this task. First of all, you'll need to decide who will be decluttering the house or the property. In some cases, friends or family may feel really uncomfortable. If it's you just may not feel ready or comfortable to go through that process, and you might want to seek help. It can be really overwhelming. I know some people who've had parents who've passed away and they've hired specific contractors, people who help clear out deceased estates, to go in there and pack up all their stuff and arrange donations. Sometimes that can be the easiest way if you're just not in a position to deal with that emotionally or physically. In this particular case, the deceased did not have a spouse or children, so it was left up to other people to declutter the house. But it was still important for the family that people who knew the deceased would go through their things. They didn't want basically a bunch of strangers going in and sorting through this person's stuff. I think for ease of reference, I'm going to refer to this person as John. John was a very private person and did not like a lot of people to visit his house, and he was a little bit older. I also spoke to my friend who is a policeman. He said this is very common in older people, particularly where they live alone, that they start to accumulate a lot of stuff. And I think it's also part of that generation that they just don't get rid of stuff because they're, I guess, brought up in that time where they keep a lot of stuff. They're taught to fix things if they break rather than go out and buy new stuff. Now, John died without leaving a will or any instructions as to what to do with all of his things. So it was basically left up to the family to try and decide what he wanted. They were told by the company who helped manage the administration of the estate that it would be really useful if they could go through all his possessions and see if they could find any paperwork relating to a solicitor or a will or anything like that. So not only when we were decluttering his house were we going through sorting and categorizing stuff, but we also had to go through and look for any papers that might help the family manage and organize his estate and just find out what he would want them to do. So you need to search for documents. You don't really want to leave it for a long time. It's something that you pretty much need to do straight away. So basically we plan to declutter the house in a couple of weeks. So that we could tackle the job in this time frame, there were about 4 or 5 of us who went into the house each day and spent about 4 or 5 hours at a time going through all the stuff. I would say we did get through it in about 7 to 10 days. And that was like having a couple of days break in between. We didn't go in every single day, but we went in most days during that 2-week period. And the house was in New Zealand. I was actually only there for that 2-week period, and so I really wanted to get the job done before I left. The next thing is you want to have a basic plan of attack. And our plan was to go in, check through every single item to make sure we'd thoroughly checked for any paperwork or any items that the family may want to keep that were sentimental, photos, things like that, as well as the legal documentation that we were searching for. And then with everything else, we would need to categorize it and sort it out to be either sold or donated. But in this case, because of the time frame and the enormous amount of the job, it was just decided that everything would basically be donated. And there were actually a lot of great items, which I'll talk about in a minute, that were able to be donated to some really good charities. Well, once everything's been categorized and sorted, then things can be donated, and you kind of need to do the clearing out simultaneously when you're dealing with a hoarder's house, because generally with a hoarder's house there is no room, no space to put anything. So you can't kind of move items around, you've kind of got to get stuff out and you've got to clear it out as you go so that you're making more space to be able to progress further into the house. It's kind of like digging a tunnel, I guess. You also need some basic equipment. What we used is disposable gloves and disposable suits. We actually bought disposable suits from Mitre 10, which is kind of like Bunnings. It's a hardware store basically, and we used those suits several times over before discarding them. And disposable gloves and also dust masks, because there was a lot of dust in the house. And if you're like me and you have dust mite allergies, or if there's mold present in the house, which in a lot of these houses, because it's hard to clean them because there's so much stuff around, there could be a lot of mold present, it is safest to go in with a mask. Definitely lots of rubbish bags. With the recycling, we were going to have to get a rubbish and recycling person to help us clear all of that away, because the council basically run out of recycling bags and the recycling bin was not nearly big enough to contain everything that was in the house that needed to be recycled. To be honest, there's no one best, I guess, place that you can start decluttering a hoarder's house, except basically to start at the entrance. Wherever you can find a gap to get into the house is where you start. Like I mentioned before, it's like digging a tunnel. You basically have to work your way into the house. You need to make progress into the house and clear out space as you go so that you can go further into the house. Easiest place to start is to grab a rubbish bag and pick up any sort of rubbish or trash that you see. There was a lot of rubbish in the house, but it was clean rubbish, so there were a lot of newspapers and notebooks and bits of paper, and it did take a lot of time to go through. It wasn't just a case of picking up things and stuffing them into bags. As I mentioned previously, we were looking for any instructions or will or any legal papers, anything that would tell us what John's wishes were. So it was really painstaking. We had to go through every single notebook and bit of paper that we found. It took a long time. He had a lot of notebooks and things and liked to write things down. Once we'd established there was nothing important or crucial in those items, we would put in the recycling bin. In terms of hoarders' houses that I've seen on TV and things like that, this was actually quite a clean house. John had a lot of stuff, but he didn't have a lot of horrible rubbish and stuff lurking in his house. There was a little bit of rubbish, and the house wasn't that clean obviously because there was just no way you would have been able to get to the walls and the windows and, you know, the carpet to vacuum. One of the first things we did was to clear out any perishable food. Now you want to be careful here, because if there's a fridge in the house and the electricity is turned off, if you open the fridge, it's gonna make the whole house smell. We were actually quite lucky that John did not have a fridge, but there was a lot of pantry items and there were some fruits and vegetables that were stored in the kitchen. So we just made sure we cleared out of the house as soon as possible, just because we didn't want the food sitting there for a couple of weeks rotting while we cleared out the rest of the house. If you can, use the outside space on the property for rubbish. Now, John did not have a large property, like there wasn't a huge backyard, and the front yard was very, very small, but luckily there was space there to put things like rubbish bags. And actually there were some people who walked past the house as we were decluttering, like neighbours, who would ask because they hadn't seen him in a while, and we would tell them that he had unfortunately passed away. For some of the bigger items which were perfectly in use, we said, well, you know, you're welcome to take a few of these things if you like. And so we were able to donate some things immediately that way. Every day at the end of a decluttering session, we took boxes of items to a charity shop. It's actually a hospice shop, and they were so grateful. John had a lot of books. He was an avid reader, and I could tell that he hadn't touched some of the books that he had purchased. But he would buy a lot of new books, but also books that had been withdrawn from the local library, so that were no longer in circulation, and so they would sell them for a cheap price to people. So he had a lot of books. He had books on photography, he had a book on blogging, not sure why, but he did. Art books and books on eating healthy and well-being and all that sort of stuff. Ones from the bookshop that he'd bought on sale were still brand new. I think it was great that we were able to give those to charity. One thing I hadn't hadn't really thought about before I started this job was I didn't realise how tiring it would be. Well, I knew it would be a lot of work, but I think just every day you come in and feel like I've hardly made a dent last time I was here, and it would feel like you were making no progress. So my advice is to take photos at the start of each day of what things look like, and then take photos again or videos at the end of the day so that you can chart your progress and see how much progress you've actually made. Every day we would feel like we hadn't made a dent, but then we would look at some of the photos that I'd taken and see that actually we had cleared more space there. And then we'd go outside and take photos of the rubbish bags that were piled up there and go, oh my gosh, look how many rubbish bags there are today. And that would help us to keep the momentum going, because it can be quite draining thinking that, oh my god, this is taking so long, we're getting nowhere, we've got so many days to finish this job, and we just feel like it's going to take forever. But you really will surprise yourself. If you take before and after photos, you'll actually see that you have done an immense amount of work each session that you've gone in there. The other thing to keep in mind is that hoarding is quite a complex issue. I'm by no means an expert on the hoarding mindset or the issue of hoarding. I think it really helps to give the owner some grace. Whether they're still living or they've passed away, I think it's really important to give the homeowner some grace and treat their items with respect. And I like to think of it as if it was my home and someone was going through all my stuff, how would I like someone to treat my belongings, and what would I like their attitude to be towards the way I lived in my home. And one of the great things, even though we could not in the end find a will, so we could not find any will, and we even rang around some solicitors to try and find out if John had made a will with them, and none of the local solicitors had heard of him. So we sort of came to a dead end on that front. But when I was going through some of the possession, I found photos and some notes about one of his beloved dogs that had passed away quite some time ago, and also a couple of cats, because John was a really avid animal lover. He just really, really loved animals. And I found deep in the corner of his spare bedroom, his dog's ashes and the ashes of two of his cats. And I've been told that he had quite a few animals over the years, but I knew because he kept the ashes of these particular animals that they were very precious to him. And also we did find at least 2 or 3 envelopes of whole rolls of photos of the dog. Just of the dog. So we know that he really, really loved this dog. And because John was cremated, the family decided to combine his ashes with the ashes of his dog and his 2 cats, which I just think is really, really lovely. It still brings a bit of a tear to my eye when I think about it. I just think that is so lovely, and it really made the whole process worthwhile of going through painstakingly through all of his stuff and checking everything, because yeah, I just think that would have really meant a lot to him. And lastly, show yourself some grace. It can be frustrating at times, and you can be going through the stuff thinking, oh my gosh, why did they have so many pairs of sunglasses, or why did they buy so much of this? And you get frustrated and you think, oh my gosh, and it feels like Groundhog Day. Sometimes you'll open a bag or box and there'll be like 10 of something that you've seen in another room. Hard to believe, really. But give yourself some grace. It can be really physically and mentally draining, decluttering such a big area. And just remember, you're doing an amazing job, and you'll see the end of this. There'll be light at the end of the tunnel, and you'll get there. You'll get to the end of it. It'll be a major achievement. I think what I appreciate from the experience, apart from having that wonderful feeling of knowing that John will be buried with his beloved animals, seeing a house that is just, you almost have to step over stuff to get anywhere. There's hardly any pathways to move. Yeah, it's just, I've seen things like that on TV, but until you've actually experienced like walking through a house like that, it's really hard to describe. But it made me really grateful for everything that I have, and it made me really grateful that I've decluttered, and it's made me very content with the amount of stuff that I have since I've decluttered. Like, I'm really content with what I have, and I know that I don't need more. And you know, there'll be some things that I buy later in life that will enhance my life, but I don't feel like I'm continuously striving to accumulate more stuff, and that's a really good feeling to have.
I hope you found this video helpful. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, or share it with someone that you know. I'll leave a link right here on the screen and also in the description below so you can watch the full hoarder house video that I've already done. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!